Kavi's voice barked through the dark. It was harsh and demanding. Liora whirled around, her hands balled into tight fists. The fear she had felt inside was suddenly replaced by a hot, burning rage. "You didn't have to do it that way," she snapped. Her voice shook with anger. "You humiliated him. You humiliated me. You used me, Kavi." Again, Kavi stopped a few feet away. His expression stayed cold and unreadable. "That was the point, Liora. Remember?" Liora shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I thought the point was to keep Joel safe. I thought we were protecting people." "No," Kavi said. His voice dropped to a calm, terrifyingly soft tone. "I showed him what happens when he tries to take what belongs to me." "You don't get it," Liora hissed, stepping toward him. "You aren't just fighting him. You're tearing me apart in the process. Do you even care?" For a split second, something flickered in Kavi's eyes. A tiny crack in the ice. Liora felt a spark of hope that he might actually understand the pain he was causing. But the crack vanished as quickly as it appeared. He looked away, his jaw tight. "You'll thank me later," he muttered. He turned his back on her and started to walk toward the cars. The finality of his words broke something inside her. The hope died for good. "Kavi, I want a divorce." The words were out before she could stop them. They hung in the cold night air, sharp and jagged. Kavi froze. He didn't move for a long time. Then, he turned around with agonizing slowness. His eyes weren't just cold anymore. They were menacing. A dark, terrifying energy seemed to radiate off him. Liora instinctively took 2 steps back. Her heart felt like it was shrinking in her chest. "You can leave me for anything else, Liora," Kavi growled. The sound was low and animalistic, but not for him. Never for him. He began to walk toward her, his stride slow and calculating. "Didn't I make it clear?" he asked. "If you break the contract, I will ruin you, and I will destroy him. But I'll start with you." Liora was trembling so hard she could barely stand. She knew he wasn't exaggerating. Kavi meant every single word. She had signed a deal with a monster, and the monster wasn't finished with her yet. Kavi reached her, his hand snaking out to grip her chin. His fingers were like iron, forcing her to look up into his dark, glowing eyes. "Do you think anything has changed just because of our history?" he snarled. "Don't you dare think you have control over me. My mind is what rules me, Liora, not my heart." He leaned in closer, his breath cold against her skin. "Hate me, loathe me all you want, but I'll be damned before I ever let you go. You are an Elon now." He let go of her chin, but the phantom pressure of his grip remained. Liora watched him walk away, knowing the truth with a sickening clarity. She hadn't just married into a powerful family. She had sold her soul to the devil, and he was never going to give it back. "Get in the car, Liora. You're making a mistake, Carmel." The shout echoed off the marble walls of the corridor, but Carmel didn't stop. He focused on the rhythmic clicking of Leora's heels fading toward the exit. She didn't look back, not once. The silence she left behind was quickly filled by the rising tide of whispers from the ballroom. Dozens of eyes burned into the back of his neck. They were hungry for a scandal, wondering if the CEO of Elon Corporation really just stepped down in the middle of a gala. Carmel didn't have the answers they wanted. He didn't even have the answers for himself. He looked across the room and caught Kavi's gaze. Kavi didn't look away. Instead, he flashed a slow, mocking smirk. It was a silent reminder of the threat he had whispered only moments ago. If Liora wasn't CEO by sunrise, the whole world would know what happened on the night of the full moon. Carmel felt his pulse thrumming in his throat. He had to give up his title, but he also had to make the pack board accept it. His hands balled into tight fists at his sides. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could Liora tell Kavi about that night? She knew it was the one thing that could destroy him. She knew Kavi would use it to turn every alpha in the region against him. He had trusted her. Even when he saw her standing in Kavi's arms, a part of him still held onto that trust. Kavi turned and followed Liora out the door, his movements fluid and confident. Carmel took a sharp breath and addressed the lingering crowd. "This transition will be finalized at a press conference in 3 days," Carmel announced. His voice was steady, projecting a strength he didn't feel. "Until then, any rumors or speculation will be dealt with severely. Enjoy the rest of the evening." He turned on his heel and headed for the exit, but a heavy hand on his shoulder stopped him. He didn't need to look up to know it was his grandfather. The old man's eyes were like chips of ice. "Whatever this mess is, fix it," the former alpha warned. His voice was low, vibrating with a cold authority that made the hair on Carmel's arms stand up. "Don't force me to come out of retirement and show you how a real alpha leads." It wasn't a piece of advice. It was a career-ending ultimatum for Carmel. His grandfather still had the loyalty of the old guard. If the old man stepped back into the ring, neither Carmel nor Kavi would stand a chance. "I have it under control," Carmel lied, his jaw tight. If you're gripped by this story and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share this with your friends. Keep watching, sit back, and enjoy the ride.
He broke away and hurried into the foyer, his eyes searching the shadows. He needed to find Liora. He didn't care if Kavi was with her. The Liora he knew, the woman who had loved him more than his own blood ever did, wouldn't just throw him to the wolves. He had hurt her, he knew that, but she was better than this. He had to get her back to his side. He had to bring her home. Her and the boy. Carmel shook his head to clear the thought, but it stuck. Joel. The kid had the exact same rare condition Carmel had. Liora came from a pure bloodline. Kavi did too. It was too much of a coincidence to be anything else. If Joel was his son, he wouldn't let Kavi play father for another second. "Cam. Stop." The voice was high and frantic. Carmel turned to see Ziva walking toward him. She was wearing a low-cut silk dress that was far too flashy for an event she wasn't supposed to attend. "What are you doing here, Ziva?" Carmel hissed. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a secluded alcove. "Granddad told you to stay out of the public eye until the Barca pack mess is settled. You're lucky he didn't see you." "I don't have anything to do with Barca," Ziva cried. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her makeup beginning to smudge. "How many times do I have to tell you? They're setting me up to ruin us. They want the Elon Alpha and Luna to fight so the pack looks weak." Carmel let out a long, frustrated breath and rubbed his temples. "I'm looking into it, okay? But you're already on thin ice. If you want to help me, you need to go home and stay there. You know how much power my grandfather still has. If he decides you're a liability, I can't protect you." Ziva didn't move. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick white envelope. "Is that how you explain this?" Carmel froze. He recognized the blue logo in the corner immediately. It was from the private lab where he had sent Joel's DNA sample. "Where did you get that?" Carmel asked. His voice dropped an octave, turning dangerous. "Why do I have it?" Ziva laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "You mean, why do I know what you're doing behind my back? This is why you wanted me out of town, isn't it? So you could play house with your ex and her brat." Carmel looked around the hallway. It was empty for now, but the gala was still in full swing just a few yards away. Any second, a rival alpha could walk out and hear everything. "I told you to go back to Tura for your own safety," Carmel said, his words clipped and cold. "And for Kalila. As for my business, I don't owe you an explanation for any of it. But you? You owe me an explanation for why you're following me. I'm your wife, Carmel. And I am the alpha," he countered, leaning in close. "Give me the envelope, Ziva. Now." The paper in Carmel's hand felt heavier than a lead weight. He stared at the numbers. The ink seemed to blur and shift under the harsh hallway lights. "Negative," Carmel whispered. He shook his head. The report was clear. There was a blood connection, but the paternity result was a flat 0. Joel was not his son. Carmel leaned against the cold marble wall. He expected to feel a sense of relief. A negative result meant no legal battles and no more scandals. Instead, a sharp pain flared in his chest. It felt like a door slamming shut on a future he didn't know he wanted. He heard footsteps. They were steady and rhythmic. Kavi rounded the corner, his face a mask of perfect calm. He didn't slow down. His eyes flicked to the envelope in Carmel's hand for a split second. There was no shock. No anger. Just a cold, empty stare. Kavi walked past him without a word. "No reaction?" Carmel called out. He turned to watch his rival. "Nothing at all, Kavi." Kavi didn't stop. He didn't even look back. Carmel looked at the seal on the envelope. A realization hit him like a physical blow. Kavi was too calm. He was a man who protected what was his with a silver-toothed grin. If he wasn't fighting, it was because he had already won. "You tampered with it," Carmel muttered to the empty air. He knew Kavi. The man was a master of details. If Kavi went to the trouble of faking a lab report, the truth was the opposite of the paper. Carmel pulled out his phone. His fingers moved fast. He needed to hear the truth from the only person who actually knew it. He dialed Liora's number. It rang once. Twice. On the third try, the line clicked open. Silence filled the earpiece. He could hear her breathing. It was soft and hesitant. "Liora," Carmel said. She didn't speak. He could picture her on the other side, jaw tight and eyes guarded. He thought about the day he kicked her out. He remembered the rain and the way he told her to never come back. If she had been carrying his child that night, he was a monster. "Joel is mine, isn't he?" Carmel asked. The silence stretched. Then, her breath hitched. It was a tiny sound, but it told him everything. She regained her cool a second later. "No," Liora said. Her voice was flat and icy. "If this is a game to hurt Kavi, you've hit a new low. Even for you." Carmel gripped the phone until his knuckles turned white. "We were married for 3 years, Liora. I know your tells. I know when you're lying to me." "I have nothing to say to you, Carmel. I'll find the truth," he snapped. "And when I do, I'm taking back everything that belongs to me." The line went dead. Carmel stared at the screen. Before he could move, a notification popped up. It was an encrypted file from Vered. The title made his blood turn to ice. Report on Kalila's unverifiable hospital visits. He opened the document. His eyes scanned the medical jargon. Kalila wasn't sick. She was never sick. Someone had been feeding his daughter wolfsbane in small doses. It was just enough to make her look weak. Just enough to keep Carmel distracted and guilty. He scrolled to the bottom. The signature was clear, Ziva Heath. Rage boiled in his gut. He had spent 3 years tied to a woman who poisoned his child to keep him in line. She wasn't a wife. She was a predator. Every memory of Ziva's worry at Kalila's bedside now felt like a slap in the face. Then, the final piece of the puzzle clicked. The poisoning incident from 3 years ago. The reason he had sent Liora away. It wasn't her, Carmel whispered. He ran for the exit. He didn't wait for the valet to greet him. He grabbed his keys and hopped into his car. He dialed Liora again as he tore out of the parking lot. "Carmel, stop calling," Liora said when she picked up. "I'm coming to you," he said. He took a sharp turn. His tires screeched against the asphalt. "I know the truth now. I know it wasn't you." Liora went quiet again. "I know you didn't poison Kalila," he said. "I already told Granddad. I'm making this right. I'm making you my Luna." Liora let out a short, bitter laugh. There was no joy in it. "It's too late, Carmel. Look at the clock. Look at the years. It's not too late. Our story ended on that rainy night," Liora said. Her voice sounded heavy, like she was carrying the weight of the world. "You can't fix what you broke into a million pieces." "I'm not giving up on you," Carmel said. He spoke slowly, making sure she heard the fire in his voice. "I'm not losing you to him." He didn't wait for her to reject him again. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pressed his foot to the floor. He would find her. He would look her in the eyes and make her stay. "I'm coming for you, Liora." "You should hurry in, ma'am. It's freezing out here," the driver said as he held the door open. Liora stepped out of the sleek black car, her fingers digging into the fabric of her designer dress. She didn't move. She just stared at the front door of the lake house. Usually, Kavi would be right behind her. He never let her return from an event alone, no matter how much they had fought. It was his way of maintaining the mask, showing the world they were the perfect power couple. But tonight, the mask had shattered. "I'll head back and return with Mr. Elon when the summit ends," the driver added before sliding back into the seat. Liora watched the taillights disappear down the long driveway. She felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the night air. The memory of the gala flashed in her mind, Kavi's fingers bruising her jaw, his eyes dark and wild. He didn't look like her husband in that moment. He looked like a predator. Will Joel and I ever be able to leave him in one piece? She wondered. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She didn't need to look to know it was Carmel. He had called 3 times already. His voice on the last call still echoed in her ears, full of a sudden, desperate kindness that terrified her even more than Kavi's rage. He claimed he knew the truth now. He claimed he knew she hadn't poisoned his daughter 3 years ago. "It's too late, Carmel," she whispered to the empty porch. She pushed the heavy front door open and stepped into the foyer. The warmth of the house usually acted as a shield, but tonight, the shadows in the corners felt long and reaching. "Mommy!" The high-pitched shout broke her trance. Joel came charging down the hallway, his little sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. Liora dropped her bag and knelt, catching the small boy in a tight hug. "Hey, buddy," Liora said, her voice trembling with relief. "You should be fast asleep by now. Did you have fun today?" Joel pulled back, his eyes wide and bright. "Mora got ice cream. Big scoops." "Is that so?" Liora tapped his nose, forced a smile onto her face. At least one person in this house was happy. Mora appeared from around the corner, wiping her hands on an apron. "He's been restless since we got home. He insisted on waiting up until you could tuck him in." "I'm sorry, Mora," Liora said, picking Joel up. He felt heavier tonight, or maybe she just felt weaker. "I'll take it from here." "I'll fix you a light dinner," Mora offered kindly. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear." Liora nodded, unable to find the words to explain that she was living with one. She carried Joel upstairs, listening to him ramble about flavor choices and cartoons until his voice grew small and slow. By the time they reached his bedroom, his head was resting on her shoulder, his breathing deep and even. She laid him down on the car-themed sheets and pulled the duvet up to his chin. For a long time, she just sat there on the edge of the bed, watching him. He looked so much like Carmel it hurt to breathe. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered, smoothing a stray hair from his forehead. "Can you ever forgive me for bringing you into this mess?" A tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. She couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, another call from Carmel. She ignored it. She couldn't deal with the man who broke her heart while trying to survive the man who currently owned her life. Exhaustion finally took hold. Liora leaned her head back against the rocking chair in the corner of the room, intending to just close her eyes for a second. She woke up to a screaming sound. It wasn't a person. It was a high-pitched, mechanical shriek that pierced through her skull. Liora gasped, but instead of fresh air, her lungs filled with thick, gray soot. She doubled over, coughing violently. The room was hazy. The smell hit her a second later, the acrid, terrifying scent of burning wood and melting plastic. "Joel," she choked out. The smoke was thicker near the ceiling, swirling like a living thing. The hallway was a wall of orange light. The lake house was no longer a home, it was a furnace. "Joel, wake up!" Liora grabbed her son, her heart hammering against her ribs. The boy stirred, coughing and rubbing his eyes. "Mommy? Why is it loud?" "We have to go, baby. Right now." She snatched him up and ran for the door, but as she reached for the handle, a heavy thud sounded from the other side. Something had fallen, blocking the exit. Through the crack at the bottom of the door, she saw the flickers of a hungry, growing fire. "Help!" Liora screamed, her voice breaking. "Mora, is anyone there?" Only the roar of the flames answered her. "Joel, wake up, please wake up." Leora's voice cracks as she pulls her son from the bed. The room is a furnace. Thick, gray smoke curls under the door like reaching fingers. Liora grabs the doorknob, but the metal sears her skin. She hisses in pain, recoiling as her palm turns a raw, angry red. The door is jammed. She lunges for the bathroom, her breath coming in ragged hitches. Locked. Panic claws at her throat, sharper than the smoke stinging her lungs. She looks at Joel. He's shifting, his small face scrunched in discomfort. She can't let him breathe this in. Liora grabs a cloth from the nightstand and douses it with water from a nearby pitcher. Her hands shake, but she works fast. She secures the damp fabric over Joel's nose and mouth. "Stay with me, baby," she whispers. She grabs a heavy wooden chair. With a grunt of effort, she swings it. The wood slams against the door handle. Again. And again. The vibration rattles her bones. On the third hit, a sharp splinter slices deep into her palm. Blood slickens the chair leg, dripping onto the floorboards, but she doesn't feel the cut. She only feels the heat. With a final, desperate heave, the wood splinters. The door flying open. A wall of orange flame greets her. Liora screams, stumbling back. The hallway is a tunnel of fire. Embers dance in the air like angry insects. She looks left, then right. The left side is a solid curtain of red. She turns right, her bare feet slapping against floorboards that groan under her weight. The stairs are gone. Half the wood has already turned to ash, and the rest is a bonfire. There has to be another way, she gasps, her throat feeling like she's swallowed broken glass. The balcony doors are blocked by falling beams. She's trapped on the second floor. Liora looks over the railing to the foyer below. It's a long drop, but the flames haven't fully claimed the ground floor yet. She holds Joel tight against her chest, shielding his head. Hold on. She leaps. Liora hits the ground in a clumsy crutch. A sickening pop echoes in her ears as her ankle twists. She bites her lips so hard she tastes copper, refusing to let a scream wake the boy. Liora. Through the haze, a figure appears. It's Mora, her clothes soot-stained and her eyes wide with terror. She's clutching a burnt arm. Are you okay? Is he okay? Mora shouts over the roar of the fire. We have to go. Liora yells back. What happened? How did it start? I don't know. Mora's voice trembles as she looks at the crumbling ceiling. I heard someone. I thought someone was here, but then the fire just exploded. A massive support beam crashes down yards away, sending a spray of sparks into the air. The heat is unbearable now. It's not just hot, it's heavy. It presses down on them, stealing the oxygen from the room. This way. The back door. Mora waves her forward. Liora limps after her, every step on her twisted ankle sending a jolt of white-hot agony up her leg. They scramble toward the kitchen, but the ceiling groans again. Another beam falls, blocking the main exit with a wall of fire. The side door in the kitchen. Mora screams. The kitchen is a death trap. Plastic containers are melting on the counters, filling the air with a toxic, chemical stench. The curtains are long gone, replaced by sheets of flame. Mora throws herself against the side door. It doesn't move. It's stuck. Mora wails, coughing violently. Move. Liora shoves her shoulder against the wood, pulling the handle with her bloody, burned hand. The pain is blinding, but she doesn't stop. Open. Please, just open. The door is warped from the heat. It won't budge. Liora, look out. Mora's shriek is the only warning she gets. Liora spins around just as a massive section of the ceiling breaks loose. Mora doesn't run away. She dives toward Liora, shoving her and Joel toward the far counter with a strength born of pure desperation. The crash is deafening. The house shakes as the heavy timber slams into the floor. Dust and ash explode into the air, blinding Liora. Mora? Liora coughs, shielding Joel. Mora. The smoke clears for a second. Mora is pinned. The flaming beam is resting right across her legs. No. No, no, no. Liora drops to her knees, reaching for the wood. Go. Mora's voice is a broken whisper. Her face is pale under the soot. Liora, get out of here. I'm not leaving you. Liora grabs the beam, trying to heave it up. Her skin blisters the moment she touches it. She screams in frustration, pulling until her muscles feel like they're going to snap. It's too heavy. It's fused to the floor by the weight of the debris. The window. Mora gasps, her eyes fluttering. Get Joel out. Don't let him die here. I'll come back for you. I'm coming back. Liora's voice breaks into a sob. The ceiling above them lets out a terrifying crack. The whole structure is tilting. Go. Mora screams with the last of her strength. Liora looks at her son, then at the woman dying to save them. She has no choice. She stumbles toward the high window above the sink. The glass is already spider-webbed from the heat. She grabs a heavy metal pot from the counter and swings it with everything she has left. The glass shatters. A blast of cold night air hits her face, and for a moment, she can breathe. She hauls herself onto the counter, her skin tearing on the jagged glass shards left in the frame. She wraps her coat tighter around Joel. "I've got you, baby," she whispers, her voice a ghost of a sound. "I've got you." She lowers him out the window first, dropping him gently onto a pile of soft, overgrown bushes just below. She watches him land safely before trying to pull herself through. The house lets out a final, agonizing groan of wood and metal. "Don't you dare give up on me now." "Tell me you found them," Kavi said, his voice a jagged edge that cut through the roar of the lake wind. The investigator flinched. He didn't look up from his clipboard. Around them, the world was a chaotic blur of flashing blue and red strobes. The rhythmic pulse of the siren lights bounced off the blackened skeletons of cedar trees. What used to be the lake house, a sanctuary Kavi had built with reinforced beams and state-of-the-art security, was now a smoldering pile of ash and jagged timber. "The structure is still cooling, Mr. Elon," the man stammered. The heat was intense. "We recovered some personal items, but we can't confirm identities until the interior is stable enough for a full sweep." "That is not what I asked." Kavi stepped into the man's personal space. His shadow loomed over the official, cast long by the floodlights. "Did you find her? Did you find my son?" The investigator swallowed hard. He looked at the wreckage, then back at Kavi with a flicker of pity that made Kavi's skin crawl. "There were no survivors located in the primary escape zones, sir. Given the speed of the collapse, it's unlikely anyone got out." Kavi didn't blink. He couldn't. If he closed his eyes, he would see the fire again. He would see the way the secondary roof had groaned and caved in the moment he tried to storm the front door an hour ago. The firefighters had dragged him back, screaming about structural integrity while his world burned. He turned away from the man, his boots crunching on glass and frozen mud. The smell of charred pine and something sickly sweet hung heavy in the air. It coated his tongue. It filled his lungs until he felt like he was suffocating on the remains of his own life. Accident. That was the word the captain had used. Kavi reached into his pocket, his fingers curling around his phone so hard the casing groaned. Liora was careful. She was the kind of woman who checked the stove 3 times before leaving a room. She was meticulous. She was safe. And Mora, he had handpicked that woman. She wasn't just a nanny. She was a ghost, a shadow trained for 3 years to kill anyone who breathed too loudly near Joel. Training didn't fail like this. Not in an hour. Not this cleanly. "Kavi, stay back," a firefighter shouted as Kavi crossed the yellow tape. He didn't listen. He walked toward the ruins, the heat still radiating from the ground and seeping through the soles of his shoes. He stopped where the front porch used to be. A broken post lay in the dirt, its white paint blistered and blackened. He reached down, touching the rough wood. It crumbled under his touch, turning to gray soot that stained his palm. His mind flashed to their last conversation. He could still see the way her lower lip had trembled. He could hear the sharp, biting edge of her voice. "You used me, Kavi." Again. He had dismissed it at the time. He told himself she was just emotional. He told himself she would settle down once the dust from the summit cleared. She always did. She was his anchor, the only thing that kept the Elon darkness from swallowing him whole. He thought he had won. He thought her staying meant she had finally accepted the cage he built for her. He realized now, staring at the smoke rising into the dawn sky, that he was wrong. She hadn't stayed because she was won over. She had stayed because she was surviving him. "Mr. Elon, please." A younger officer approached him, keeping a respectful distance. "The east section is leaning. If a gust of wind hits it, the whole chimney is coming down." Kavi didn't move. "Leave me." "Sir, it's for your safety." "I said leave me." Kavi roared. The sound was raw, a primal thing that echoed across the water. The officer retreated. Kavi was alone with the ghosts. He looked out at the lake. The water was black and still, indifferent to the tragedy on the shore. He had all the money in the world. He had men who would jump off a cliff if he gave the order. He had the power to move markets and break legacies. Yet, he couldn't keep a woman and a child safe in a house he owned. As the sun began to bleed over the horizon, painting the smoke in shades of bruised purple and orange, a figure appeared near the perimeter. Kavi stiffened. He recognized the silhouette. He recognized the way the man held himself, even covered in ash. Carmel. His rival stood behind the police line, his face a mask of pale devastation. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world. He shouldn't have been there. He certainly shouldn't have arrived before the news even hit the wires. Kavi's grief shifted, curdling into a hot, focused rage. He marched toward the tape, his eyes locked on Carmel. "Kavi," Carmel said. His voice was thick, lacking its usual polished arrogance. They didn't make it." The scouts confirmed the entry points were blocked. "Don't," Kavi hissed, stopping inches from the other man. "Don't you dare act like you have a right to speak of her." Carmel's jaw tightened. "I cared about her too." "You are the reason she ran." Kavi's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "You are the reason she was here instead of at the estate. If you hadn't cornered her at the summit, she wouldn't have been looking for an escape." "We both did this, Kavi," Carmel replied softly. "Look at the house. Look at what's left. Our war burned them both." Kavi's fist clenched. He wanted to swing. He wanted to feel the crunch of bone. He wanted to blame Carmel, to blame the investigators, to blame the wind. But as he looked past Carmel, he saw a black town car idling on the road. His grandfather, the patriarch of the Elon name, stood by the car. The old man was leaning heavily on his silver-topped cane, his eyes as cold as the lake water. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't offer words of comfort. He simply watched the ruins of his legacy with a stony silence that said more than any shout could. The old man had warned them. He had said their obsession with the girl and their hatred for each other would leave them with nothing but ashes. Kavi looked back at Carmel, his eyes burning with a promise of violence. "If I find out you had a hand in this, if there is even a shadow of a doubt that this wasn't an accident, I will spend every cent I own to ensure you never see the light of day again." Carmel didn't flinch. He just stared at the smoking remains of the house. "Then we're looking for the same person, because an accident doesn't burn that fast." Kavi felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. He turned back to the wreckage, his heart a hollow chamber. "Get your men off my property, Carmel," Kavi said, his voice cold and final. "The next person who touches this ash without my permission is a dead man." "They say the fire started near the basement generator," Carmel said, his voice cutting through the thick, smoky silence. He didn't look away from the smoldering ruins. She might have been trapped before she even realized. "Stop talking," Kavi growled. He stepped into Carmel's space, his shoulders rigid. "You don't get to say her name. Not now. Not ever." Carmel narrowed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "Kavi, listen to me. Not ever." Kavi snapped. The nearby police officers froze. The air around the two men turned cold despite the lingering heat from the wreckage. Kavi watched Carmel's face, waiting for the mask to slip. When it finally did, Kavi didn't see the guilt he expected. He didn't see pity. He saw a dark, heavy regret. Even worse, he saw blame. Carmel looked at him as if he were the one who struck the match. The thought felt like a blade twisting in Kavi's ribs. Maybe Carmel was right. Maybe Kavi had caused this. He knew Carmel loved her. He probably still did. "That's enough." The command sliced through the air. Kavi didn't need to turn around to know his grandfather was standing there. The old man walked forward, his expression a wall of stone. "Not here," the elder Elon said, his voice dropping to a sharp warning. "Do not argue over her corpse." Something inside Kavi snapped. He felt the heat rise to his throat. "Don't you dare say that." "She's not." The words died. Kavi looked back at the black, twisted metal and the ash covering the ground. The truth was a physical weight, crushing the air out of his lungs. She was gone. Whether she was dead or simply lost to him, the result was the same. His vision blurred, not with tears, but with the sheer pressure of the grief. He had forgotten how to cry a long time ago. Carmel looked ready to snap back, perhaps to point more fingers just to ease his own conscience. But Kavi gave him one look, a look so dark and promising of violence, that the other man stayed silent. Kavi knew if Carmel breathed one more word of sorrow, he would lose control completely. Kavi turned his back on them both. He walked toward the waiting car, his boots sinking into the wet, soot-stained mud. Every step felt like he was dragging lead weights. Behind him, he heard his grandfather muttering to Carmel. They were already talking about the company. They were discussing the family legacy and the morning headlines. It was always about the headlines. Kavi opened the car door but stopped halfway. Something glinted in the dirt near the tire. He reached down, his fingers brushing against cold metal. It was a bracelet. One side was blackened by the fire, but he recognized it instantly. Liora had bought it for him and Joel. The memory hit him of the day she had handed it to him, her eyes defiant even when things were at their worst. He squeezed the metal until the edges dug into his palm. He climbed into the back seat and sat in the dark. Barak, his driver, waited for a command, but Kavi just stared out the window. The seat beside him was empty. The silence felt like a physical force pressing against his chest. He remembered the last thing he had said to her. "Hate me. Loathe me. But I'll be damned before I divorce you." Had those been the last words she thought of while the house burned? The thought ripped through him. He rubbed a shaking hand over his face. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. He was going to fix it. He was going to make her forgive him. They were supposed to keep playing their game until the wounds healed. Now, there was only a hollow ache that he couldn't kill. "Alpha?" Barak asked softly. "Where to?" Kavi stared into the distance. "Nowhere," he muttered. "There's nowhere left to go." 1 month later. "Alpha," Barak said, standing at the door of the study. "It's time." Kavi looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing. He had lost track of the hours again. Barak held a dark suit over his arm and a freshly pressed white shirt. "Time for what?" Kavi asked. "The funeral starts soon," Barak added, his voice hesitant. The word made Kavi's heart constrict. The Elons, specifically his grandfather, were in a hurry to bury the memory. They had wasted no time planning a massive service and inviting every distant relative. They wanted the world to see them mourning so they could move on to the next business quarter. Liora's own father and brother had been just as cold. When the news broke, their response was a simple shrug of the shoulders. They claimed everything happened as it was meant to. Kavi knew they had never cared for her. They had sold her to the Elons to pay off a debt years ago. But Kavi couldn't stop thinking about the father's tone. He wanted to believe their refusal to attend wasn't just neglect. He wanted to believe they knew something he didn't. He was still clinging to the tiny, impossible hope that Liora and Joel were alive. Everyone else had given up. They had found the body of Mora, the maid, in the wreckage. Kavi's fists clenched on the desk. He was the one who had hired Mora. He was the one who brought her into this mess, just like he had done with Liora. But no other bodies had been found. The authorities had dragged the lake and searched every inch of the forest. Nothing. To hold a funeral without a body was a move only the Elons would make. They wanted a closed chapter. They wanted the bad press from the fire and the recent scandals to go away. "Alpha," Barak called again. Kavi fixed him with a blank stare. "Take the suit away." "I'm not going." Barak looked alarmed. "Sir, you haven't been seen in public since the summit. People are talking." "Let them talk," Kavi said. "There are rumors that you were involved," Barak pushed, his voice urgent. "If you don't show up to the funeral for your wife and son, you're confirming every lie the media prints." Kavi slammed his hand onto the table. The wood groaned under the impact. Barak jumped, quickly looking at the floor. "My wife and son are missing," Kavi hissed. "And people are worried about the media?" He scoffed and turned toward the window. The public was easy to manipulate. They were happy to believe the black sheep of the family had finally turned into a murderer. They thought he would set fire to his own life. "If they want to see what I'm capable of, I'll show them," Kavi said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Everyone will pay for what happened at that lake. And I'm starting with the Elons." "Sir, the ceremony begins in 20 minutes, Barak reminded him. Kavi looked at the burnt bracelet sitting on his desk. "Then let them start. I have my own way of saying goodbye." "Look at them all," Carmel muttered under his breath. He adjusted his silk tie as he scanned the chapel. Rows of pack members sat in silence. Their dark suits and veils filled the hall to its limit. Every high-ranking Alpha and Luna from the surrounding territories had arrived. They were the elite. The top 1%. Yet, not a single person in the room actually knew Liora. They didn't know her favorite meals. They didn't know how she liked to style her hair or the way she smelled when she was happy. They were here for the status. Carmel felt a sharp pang of guilt. He pushed it down. This funeral was a necessity. It provided public closure. Without it, the narrative of the fire would spiral out of control. The Elon name had already taken a hit. A property had burned to the ground and lives were lost right after the summit. His grandfather was doing everything possible to bury the scandal before the other packs could move in. Carmel remembered his own speech at the summit. He had publicly handed the CEO title to Liora. The news hadn't fully leaked yet, but it was coming. This funeral was the only way to tie up the loose ends from the lake house incident. "Where is he?" Carmel whispered. His eyes searched the crowd. Kavi was missing. Fury burned in Carmel's chest. The man never missed a chance to cause trouble. To Carmel, Kavi's absence was proof. Liora had been nothing but a tool to him. Now that she was gone, Kavi didn't even have the decency to show up. It made Carmel wonder about the boy. Joel. If Kavi cared so little, then perhaps the rumors were true. Maybe Joel really was Carmel's son. Maybe the fire was Kavi's way of making sure Carmel never found out the truth. A hand touched his arm. Ziva hooked her elbow through his. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We have to be strong," Ziva whispered. Carmel looked at her. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean back. His grandfather always said that the easiest way to bury a scandal was with a bigger one. It was the only reason Ziva wasn't in a cell. The public was so distracted by the fire at the lake house that they forgot about Ziva's ties to the Barca pack. The police had buried her file to stay on the good side of the Elon family. Ziva had crawled back into her role as Luna over the last month. She sat in the front row now, sobbing softly into a lace handkerchief. Carmel watched her out of the corner of his eye. He knew the truth now. She wasn't the pure, innocent woman he once loved. She was the woman who sold his company's secrets to his rivals because he wouldn't give her shares. She was acting like a devastated sister-in-law, but it was all a show. "Daddy," a small voice called out. Carmel looked down. Kalila was curled up on his other side. Her eyes were red and watery. She was staring at the large photo at the front of the hall. It showed Liora and Joel smiling together. "Is Aunt Liora and little Joel really gone?" Kalila asked. Her voice shook. Carmel flinched. The word stung. Aunt Liora. If he hadn't made that terrible mistake 3 years ago, Liora would be Kalila's mother right now. Joel would be growing up in a home with a father who deserved him. He thought back to the report from his investigator, Vered. It was all a setup. Ziva had framed Liora to get her out of the way. And Carmel had let it happen. He couldn't blame anyone but himself. Liora had told him the truth that night. She told him he was just looking for an excuse to get rid of her. She was right. He had been a coward. He chose the mate who looked at him with adoration over the woman who knew his weaknesses. He chose the woman who didn't know he wasn't fit to be alpha. Carmel looked away from his daughter. He didn't have an answer for her. The funeral would last until moonrise. Then, the final burial rites would begin. If Kavi didn't show up by then, his reputation would be ruined forever. In their world, family was everything. A man who skipped his wife's funeral was a man who didn't deserve power. Kavi was digging his own grave. All the wealth of Macelink wouldn't save him from the social fallout. Let him stay away, Carmel thought. If Kavi tried to reveal the secrets of their past now, nobody would believe him. Carmel had won once before. He could do it again. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He gently shrugged Ziva's hand off his arm and stood up. He walked toward the side exit of the chapel. He didn't stop until he was outside in the cool air. He answered the call. "Dr. Reiner?" "Alpha," the doctor said. His voice was calm. "She is waking up." Carmel felt a slow smile spread across his face. He looked back through the glass door at the portrait of Liora holding the boy. "I'll be there immediately," Carmel said. The metallic tang of disinfectant hung heavy in the air. Liora tried to swallow, but her throat felt like it had been scraped with sandpaper. Every breath was a struggle. Beside her, a rhythmic, hollow beeping filled the silence. It sounded like a heartbeat, but it was too mechanical, too cold. Liora forced her eyes open. The light from above was blinding, white and sharp. She squinted, her vision slowly pulling the world into focus. A white ceiling stared back at her. Plastic tubes snaked away from her arms, connecting her to various machines. She was in a hospital. Memory hit her like a physical blow. Fire. Smoke. The sound of timber snapping. Joel, she croaked. The name was barely a puff of air, but the effort sent a spike of pain through her chest. Liora. The voice was too close. She turned her head, wincing as a sharp ache traveled down her neck. Carmel sat in a chair right next to her bed. He looked perfectly composed, dressed in a sharp black suit with every hair in place. He looked like he had just stepped out of a boardroom, not a tragedy. He reached out and took her hand before she could pull away. His skin felt unnaturally warm against her cold fingers. "Easy," Carmel said, his voice dropping to a soothing hum. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt like a lie. Liora's mind raced through the fractured images of that night. The heat, the suffocating black smoke, and the weight of her son in her arms. "Where is he?" Liora demanded, her voice cracking. "Where is my baby?" Carmel hesitated. He looked away for a split second, and in that moment, Liora's heart stopped. Panic flared in her chest, hot and wild. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to obey. "He's alive," Carmel said quickly, forcing a small smile. Liora let out a sob that was half relief and half agony. She choked on the air, her lungs still feeling the ghost of the smoke. "I want to see him. Take me to him." "You can't." "Not yet." Carmel squeezed her hand, his thumb stroking her palm in a way that made her skin crawl. "He's in the next room, but he's still unconscious. The doctors are monitoring him around the clock." "Unconscious," Liora whispered. The weight on her chest grew heavier. "How long has it been? What day is it?" Carmel's jaw tightened. He looked at the window, where the morning sun was streaming through the blinds. "It's been a month, Liora." Liora stared at him, her mind refusing to process the words. A month. She had lost an entire month of her life, while her son lay in a coma in the next room. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "The fire. How did we get out?" "There was an explosion right as the flames reached the peak," Carmel explained softly. "I found you near the lake. You were barely breathing, Liora. You'd gone into shock. If I hadn't arrived when I did." He didn't finish the sentence. "He didn't have to." "You found us?" Liora asked. She tried to piece the timeline together, but the smoke in her memory wouldn't clear. "Mora, is she?" Carmel looked down at his feet. The silence lasted too long. "She didn't make it." The news felt like a physical weight crushing Liora's ribs. Mora had been right there. She had been trying to help. Liora turned her face away, hot tears finally spilling over and soaking into the thin hospital pillow. "Liora, please," Carmel said, his voice thick with a forced kind of sympathy. "I know it's hard. But you aren't alone anymore. I'm here." Liora wiped her eyes with her free hand, her suspicion finally cutting through the grief. Something about Carmel's tone was too certain, too controlled. "Where is Kavi?" she asked. The change in Carmel was instant. His body went rigid. He stood up abruptly and walked toward the window, turning his back on her. He stared out at the parking lot for a long time without speaking. "Kavi left," Carmel said finally. "Left? What are you talking about?" "He left the lake before the fire even spread," Carmel said, his voice hardening. "My people looked into it. The fire started in the generator room, but the power had already been cut. Kavi was seen driving away from the property right around that time." Liora shook her head. "That's impossible. He wouldn't leave us there." "He did," Carmel snapped, turning back to face her. "He hasn't shown up once. He hasn't called. He hasn't even asked the doctors if his own son is still breathing." Liora felt a cold chill wash over her. She remembered Mora saying she heard someone entering the house before the fire started. She remembered Kavi's fury in the parking lot at the summit. "You're lying," Liora whispered, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I wish I were," Carmel said. He stepped back to the bedside, leaning in close. He felt betrayed. "He saw you take my side at the summit, and he snapped. You know how he is, Liora. He's unpredictable. He's dangerous." "You don't know him," she defended, though her voice lacked conviction. "He's my brother," Carmel shouted, the sudden volume making Liora flinch. He lowered his voice immediately, reaching out to touch her face. I know exactly what he's capable of. I saw the bruises he left on you. I saw the way he looked at you. You're making excuses for a man who tried to burn you alive. Liora squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out his words. She could still feel Kavi's hand on her jaw from their last fight. She could still hear him saying he would never let her go. Stop it, she pleaded. I won't let him hurt you again, Carmel whispered. He made his choice when he drove away from that burning house. Liora looked at Carmel, her eyes wide and searching. The man she married was a lot of things: cold, cruel, and possessive, but she couldn't wrap her mind around this. Are you saying Kavi set the fire? She asked. Carmel didn't say a word. He just held her gaze with a look of grim confirmation. Liora's breath hitched as the realization settled in her gut like lead. She thought of the 3 years they had spent together. She thought of the father he was supposed to be. He wouldn't, Liora sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. He wouldn't do that to his own son. Carmel leaned down, his face inches from hers. Then where is he, Liora? It's over now, Carmel said, his voice a low honeyed purr. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Liora felt his thumb graze her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. She wanted to pull away, but her limbs felt like they were made of lead. She wasn't afraid of Kavi, broken and angry, yes, but never afraid. Carmel's touch, however, made her skin crawl. What did they give me? Liora managed to whisper. Her tongue felt thick, sticking to the roof of her mouth. Carmel hesitated, his eyes reflecting a concern that felt just a little too practiced. Painkillers, Liora. You were badly hurt. There was shrapnel they had to remove. Liora's eyes drifted to the 4-bag hanging like a silent sentinel above the bed. Clear liquid dripped steadily into the tube. She knew what painkillers felt like, and this wasn't it. The world was lagging, the edges of her vision blurring into soft, dark smudges. It felt like Carmel was the only one moving at full speed while she was trapped in slow motion. He was controlling the very pace of her thoughts. You should rest, he whispered, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. I'll be right here. Liora wanted to scream that she needed to see her son, Joel. She wanted to demand an explanation from Kavi. She wanted to breathe air that didn't smell like Carmel's suffocating cologne. But the black spots dancing in her eyes won the battle. As her consciousness slipped away, she saw a faint, unreadable smile on Carmel's lips. When she woke again, the room was bathed in the blue shadows of night. The bright hospital lights had been dimmed. Her head throbbed with a rhythmic, pulsing ache that made her teeth hurt. Slowly, she turned her head. The chair beside her was empty. She was finally alone. Liora exhaled a shaky breath of relief. Her hand trembled as she reached for the railing of the bed. The heart monitor began to beep a faster, frantic rhythm. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness slammed into her like a physical blow. She fell back against the pillows, gasping for air. Joel, she croaked. Her throat was a desert. If Carmel wouldn't take her to her son, she would find him herself. She braced her elbows against the mattress, forcing her body upward. Just as she managed to steady herself, voices drifted through the heavy hospital door. One was deep and clinical, the doctor. The other was unmistakably Carmel. Keep her on it for now, Carmel was saying. She's still fragile. The sedative keeps her calm. That's exactly what she needs until everything is sorted out. Sedative. The word hit Liora harder than the dizziness. Her pulse spiked, the monitor echoing her panic. Footsteps approached the door. Liora scrambled to lay back down, squeezing her eyes shut and forcing her breathing to slow. The door creaked open. The air in the room shifted as 2 figures approached the bed. Her vitals are steady, the doctor murmured. It's amazing how fast she's recovering from such grave injuries. She's strong, Carmel said softly. She always was. Liora felt him lean in close. His breath fanned across her ear, making her stomach turn. You'll be fine soon, love. Then we'll take Joel home. We'll start over. The word love felt like a threat. The door clicked shut, leaving her in the silence once more. Liora opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling, a single tear tracking down into her hair. She knew Carmel. She knew the way he twisted words until the truth was unrecognizable. He was claiming Kavi had abandoned them. He was implying Kavi had set the fire at the lake house. Kavi might be cold, Liora thought, her hands clenching the sheets. He might be cruel. But he would die before he let Joel get hurt. She remembered the smoke. The way the fire had roared like a living beast. She remembered Mora's hand slipping from hers in the chaos. Mora had said someone entered the house that night. Carmel said it was Kavi. But Carmel had been the one following her to the lake house. And Ziva, Kavi's shadow, had been suspiciously absent. Anger, cold and sharp, began to replace the fog in her mind. The Elon brothers were using her as a pawn in their twisted game. Kavi had broken his promise to keep them safe, and now Carmel was trying to keep her a prisoner in a drug-induced haze. Kavi, she whispered to the empty room. I should never have trusted you. The monitor chirped in agreement. Liora looked at her bandaged hands. If it was Kavi, he would pay. If it was Carmel, she would destroy him. And if Ziva had a hand in the fire that almost killed her son, she would burn the entire Elon dynasty to the ground. She wasn't just a wife or a victim anymore. She was a mother, and she was waking up. I'm coming for the truth, Liora vowed. You're up, Carmel said. Liora looked up from the hospital bed. She wasn't surprised to see him sitting there. At this point, she almost expected it. It had been 3 days since she first woke up from the fire. Carmel came every day. He stayed for hours, watching her and tending to her until she drifted back into a drug-induced sleep. Every morning, Liora made the same plea. She asked to see Joel. Every morning, Carmel gave her the same answer. He promised to take her to him soon. But before the conversation could go further, the sedatives in her foreline would pull her back into the darkness. 3 days had passed with no answers and no Joel. Carmel offered no explanations. He just kept stalling. Liora watched him carefully. He didn't realize that she knew about the sedatives. He also didn't realize they were losing their power. Her pure blood biology was already adapting to the drugs. Her mind was getting sharper while he thought she was still fading. Deep down, she didn't think Carmel would physically hurt her. But she didn't trust him either. Nothing had made sense since the fire. She had reached 2 conclusions while lying in that bed. First, Carmel was lying about Joel being in a coma. That was just an excuse to keep her away. Second, Carmel finally knew the truth. He knew Joel was his son and not Kavi's. You don't have Joel, do you? Liora asked. The question caught Carmel off guard. He stared at her for a long moment. His eyes dropped to the floor as if the answer was written on the white tiles. I did, Carmel admitted. His voice was low. Until 5 days ago. Liora felt her blood run cold. I didn't want to upset you, he continued. I didn't want to ruin your recovery. Leora's heart dropped. She had asked the question hoping he would deny it. She wanted a better explanation for why he was avoiding her. But his words confirmed her worst fears. If Carmel didn't have her son, then who did? Her lips trembled. Her tongue felt like lead, making it hard to speak. He's alive, Carmel said quickly, sensing her panic. I am sure of that. My enforcers reported that an unidentified group took him. They grabbed him when he was being moved from the emergency unit. An unknown group? Liora managed to whisper. Carmel nodded. They don't have any known ties to other packs. They probably just want something from the Elon pack. They likely hope to use Joel as leverage. Liora felt her throat tighten. The pain in her chest was sharper than any physical wound. False hope is more cruel than the truth, she said. Why did you lie to me for so long? Carmel winced. He looked like he was in physical pain. We are doing everything we can to find him. We're getting close, Liora. I will get him back to you. I swear it. He reached out and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Trust me. Liora found enough strength to pull her hand away. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. There was no one left to trust in this room or this pack. Look at this, Carmel said. He placed a small metal object in her palm. This group is well organized. This is their seal. Liora looked down at the metal. A regal, mysterious howling wolf was engraved into the surface. I know the seals of every alpha on this continent, Carmel confessed. I've never seen this one before. But it's a lead. My enforcers are on the trail. They won't stop until they find him. He trailed off, his eyes burning with a sudden determination. Liora saw it then. He definitely knew. The truth about Joel's parentage was out, but it didn't change anything. To the Elons, the truth was just something they twisted to fit their own power. "Do you recognize it?" Carmel asked. He shook his head before she could answer. "What am I saying?" "Of course you wouldn't." Liora turned her head away and closed her eyes. She didn't want him to see her face. Carmel exhaled a heavy, shaky breath. "I know how hard this is. To realize you've been away from Joel for a whole month. And then, just before you woke up, he was taken." The guilt started to eat at her. It was bad enough thinking her son was hurt, but knowing he was in the hands of strangers was worse. Her heart monitor began to beat faster. The rhythm echoed her rising panic. She needed to get out of this bed. She needed to find her son herself. She couldn't rely on Carmel or Kavi. Both men had their own agendas. Relying on them had been her biggest mistake. "Liora." Carmel's voice sounded panicked. "Liora, you have to calm down. You're going to hurt yourself." She could see his lips moving, but the sound was getting further away. It felt like he was speaking to her from the bottom of a deep well. The hospital door swung open. A doctor rushed in, his white coat blurring in her vision. Dizziness hit her like a wave. Black spots danced across her eyes. Liora didn't fight the darkness this time. She welcomed it. She needed to wake up stronger. She needed to be ready to fight. "Find him, Carmel," Liora whispered before the world went black. "The dirt is still too loose, Kavi. You should be the first one to throw the handful." Kavi looked at Elder Silas. The old man's voice was like sandpaper. He stood by the edge of the pit, holding a polished wooden box that was supposed to contain what was left of Joel. There was a second box next to it for Liora. Both were empty. There were no bodies to bury. There was only ash and the smell of expensive flowers meant to cover up the scent of scorched earth. "I am not throwing anything," Kavi said. His voice sounded flat. It did not feel like it belonged to him. He felt like a spectator in his own life. "The pack needs to see you lead," Silas whispered. The elder leaned closer. His breath smelled like peppermint and decay. It was a cloying scent that made Kavi want to gag. "Liora and Joel are gone. The Elon pack cannot mourn forever. We need to discuss the line of succession today." Kavi looked past him. The entire pack was gathered in the clearing. They were dressed in black, their heads bowed. Some were sobbing. It was a loud, ugly sound. It felt fake to Kavi. They were not crying for his brother or the woman he loved. They were crying because they were afraid of what comes next. They were crying for their own comfort. "They have been dead for 48 hours, Silas," Kavi said. He stepped toward the man until Silas had to look up at him. "And you are already trying to replace them." "We are trying to protect the company," Silas snapped. "A pack without a clear heir is a pack in chaos. Name a successor. Erase the uncertainty." "Erase Joel, you mean," Kavi corrected. He turned away from the elder. His eyes scanned the crowd. He was looking for a specific face, but he found Marcus, Leora's father, instead. Marcus was standing near the front. He was not crying. He was not even looking at the caskets. He was staring at a bird on a nearby branch. He looked bored. His daughter was supposed to be in that box. He should have been destroyed. Instead, he looked like he was waiting for a bus. A cold chill settled in Kavi's gut. This was not the silence of a man in shock. This was the silence of a man who knew a secret. Kavi looked for Carmel next. His sister never missed a chance to perform. She loved the spotlight, especially when she could play the grieving relative. But her spot in the front row was empty. His skin began to itch. It was a physical sensation, a hum under his muscles that told him something was wrong. His predator instincts were screaming. When Carmel is quiet, she is dangerous. When she is missing, she is already moving. Kavi did not wait for the closing prayer. He turned and walked toward the edge of the woods, headed for the ruins of the lab. "Kavi, where are you going?" Silas shouted. Kavi ignored him. He did not care about the company. He did not care about the succession. He wanted the anchor that kept him human. He wanted Liora. The lab was a blackened skeleton of steel and concrete. The police tape had been shredded by the wind. Kavi stepped over the debris, his boots crunching on glass. The air here still tasted like chemicals and smoke. He walked to the spot where he had last tracked Carmel. The ground was covered in a thick layer of soot. It was gray and fine, like flour. Kavi knelt down. There, near the edge of a fallen support beam, was a single footprint. It was fresh. The edges were sharp. It was a small print, a woman's shoe. Not a heavy work boot or a sneaker. A flat dress shoe. Kavi reached out and touched the edge of the print. The soot was still loose. Someone had been here within the last hour while the rest of the pack was distracted by the funeral. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Barak. "Sir, the elders are asking why you left the service," Barak said. "Let them ask," Kavi replied. He stood up, his eyes locked on that footprint. "Barak, I need you to do something. Forget the pack. Forget the internal audits. What do you need?" "I want a full list of Carmel's private medical expenditures over the last 48 hours. Check the black market suppliers. Look for anything off the books. The elders will see those queries, Kavi. They monitor the pack accounts." "Use my personal funds," Kavi said. His heart was thumping against his ribs. "I do not care what it costs. Look for respiratory equipment. Look for lung stimulants." Kavi waited. He could hear Barak typing on the other end. The silence stretched for a full minute. "I found something," Barak said. His voice was low. She did not use the pack pharmacy. She went through a third party in the city. She bought 3 vials of Pulmogen. "What is that?" "It is a high-grade stimulant," Barak explained. "It is used for severe smoke inhalation. It forces the lungs to regenerate tissue after a fire. It is rare, Kavi. And it is very expensive." Kavi looked at the empty funeral program in his hand. It had Liora's face on the front. She was smiling in the photo, her eyes bright and full of life. She was not in that box. Carmel had not burned the evidence. She had stolen it. Kavi felt a surge of heat rush through his veins. The grief that had been paralyzing him for 2 days vanished. It was replaced by a sharp, lethal focus. He knew his sister. She would not buy those drugs for herself. She did not have a cough. She did not have a scratch on her. She was keeping someone alive. Kavi crumpled the program in his fist, crushing Liora's face into a ball of paper. He looked back toward the funeral, where the pack was still mourning 2 empty boxes. They were all fools. "Barak, track the delivery address for those stimulants," Kavi said. "I have a coordinate in the industrial district. An old warehouse owned by one of Carmel's shell companies." "What are you going to do?" Kavi looked at the soot on his fingers. The scent of Liora's perfume was gone. It was replaced by the metallic tang of blood in the back of his throat. "I am going to bring her home," Kavi said. "He has her. Drink this, Liora. It will help with the coughing." The voice was like silk. It was too smooth, too perfect. Liora opened her eyes and immediately squinted against the surgical white glare of the ceiling. Everything smelled like ozone and expensive bleach. She tried to sit up, but her chest felt like it was filled with broken glass. A jagged, wet cough tore through her throat. "Don't move too fast," Carmel said. He was sitting in a plush velvet chair next to her bed. He looked immaculate in a gray suit, not a single hair out of place. "The smoke did a lot of damage. The doctors said you were minutes away from permanent lung failure." Liora ignored the glass of water he held out. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her left ankle was wrapped in a thick, pressurized brace. When her foot touched the floor, a white-hot spike of pain shot up her leg. She let out a soft hiss and collapsed back onto the mattress. "Where is Joel?" she managed to gasp. Her voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. Carmel set the glass down on a marble-topped rolling tray. He leaned forward, his face full of practiced concern. "He is safe. He is in the pediatric wing of this facility. But he is fragile, Liora. Seeing you like this, smelling of smoke and covered in bruises, it would traumatize him. We need to get you healthy first." Liora looked around the room. This wasn't a hospital. The walls were paneled in lightwood. There were no windows, only high-end LED panels that simulated daylight. The door was heavy steel, disguised with a wood veneer. There was no handle on the inside. "Where are we?" she asked. "This isn't the city hospital. It is my private estate," Carmel said. "I couldn't leave you at a public clinic. Kavi's people are everywhere. I had to pull you out of the wreckage before the police arrived." Liora's heart gave a hard, painful thud against her ribs. "Kavi. Where is he?" Carmel looked away. He let out a long, heavy sigh. It was the sound of a man forced to deliver terrible news. He's gone, Liora. He didn't even wait for the fire department to finish their sweep. My scouts saw him leaving the perimeter with Yala. You're lying, Liora whispered. I wish I were. But you know Kavi. He is a man of logic. To him, you were a liability that almost got him killed. Once he realized the building was coming down, he took the asset he could still use. Yala is back in his penthouse. Life has already returned to normal for them. He reached out to touch her hand, but Liora pulled away. The movement made her dizzy. She remembered the heat of the fire. She remembered the weight of the beams. She remembered Kavi's face in the smoke, but the details were blurring. He wouldn't just leave me, she said, though her confidence was shaking. He is a devil, Liora. He told you that himself, didn't he? He was honest about being a monster. I am just the man picking up the pieces. Carmel stood up and smoothed his jacket. Rest. I will have the nurse bring you something for the pain. He walked to the door. It buzzed and clicked open before he even touched it. An electronic lock. A nurse in a crisp white uniform moved past him, carrying a tray of medications. Carmel stepped out, and the door sealed with a heavy, vacuum-sealed thud. Liora watched the nurse. The woman was middle-aged and silent. She began setting out small plastic cups of pills. She moved with robotic efficiency. When she turned to adjust the Ford drip, a folder tucked under her arm slipped. It hit the floor, spilling a few sheets of paper. Liora leaned over, ignoring the protest from her lungs. She reached down and grabbed the closest page before the nurse could react. At the top of the page was a logo she knew too well. A stylized T inside a circle. The Thorne pack. The document was a medical transfer authorization. It wasn't signed by a doctor. It was signed by her father. Give me that, the nurse said, her voice sharp. She snatched the paper out of Liora's hand and stuffed it back into the folder. My father, Liora said. He knows I'm here? The nurse didn't answer. She finished the Ford adjustment and headed for the door. Wait. Liora called out. Is he coming here? Did he help Carmel bring me here? The nurse didn't even look back. The door buzzed, opened, and closed. Liora was alone again. She stared at the door. She thought about Kavi. He had been cruel. He had been demanding. He had treated her like a tool in a game of chess. But he had never lied about what he was. He showed her his teeth from the very beginning. Carmel was different. He was all smiles and soft beds and expensive medicine. He was a saint who built a golden cage. He used her son as a padlock. Liora tried to stand again. This time, she gritted her teeth against the agony in her ankle. She hobbled toward the wall, trailing the 4-pole behind her. She ran her hand over the wood paneling. It was reinforced. There were no seams. No cracks. She looked at her reflection in the darkened screen of a monitor. Her hair was singed. There was a dark bruise blossoming across her cheekbone. Her eyes looked older. She wasn't the terrified girl who had walked down the aisle to marry Carmel. She wasn't the victim who had hidden in the shadows of Kavi's world. She realized then that being rescued was just another word for being captured. Her father had sold her out. Carmel had bought her back. They were all treating her like a piece of property to be moved between warehouses. She sank down onto the floor, her back against the cold steel of the door. She could hear the faint hum of the air filtration system. It was the only sound in the room. Carmel thought he had won. He thought he could feed her lies about Kavi and use Joel to keep her quiet. He thought she was still the same person he could manipulate with a kind word and a threat. Liora leaned her head back against the door. She closed her eyes and felt the cold metal against her scalp. I'm not the girl who married you, Carmel, she whispered to the empty, silent room. I'm the one who will bury you. He took her, Kavi. He took my daughter, and he didn't even leave a note. Ziva was pacing the length of Carmel's mahogany-paneled office. Her hair was a bird's nest of blonde tangles. She looked like a woman who had been screaming at the walls for hours. She didn't look like a Luna. She looked like a casualty. Kavi stood by the window, his arms crossed. He didn't care about Ziva's hysterics. He didn't care about her daughter. His mind was a loop of the fire, the falling beams, and the empty space where Liora should have been when he went back in. Where is he, Ziva? Kavi's voice was low. It was the sound of a predator holding back a roar. I told you I don't know. Ziva grabbed a crystal decanter from the desk and flung it. It shattered against the door. He moved the security teams. He changed the codes. He's hiding from me. From his own mate. Kavi inhaled deeply. The room was thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and Ziva's floral perfume. But underneath it, clinging to the heavy velvet curtains, was something else. Sandalwood. It was Carmel's signature scent. And beneath that, a faint, lingering trace of jasmine. Liora. He walked toward the ventilation duct near the ceiling. The scent was stronger there. It was being pulled through the central air system. He knew this building. He knew the blueprints of every safe house the pack owned. Safe House 4, Kavi muttered. What? Ziva stopped pacing, her eyes wide and bloodshot. He's at the old estate. The one with the reinforced bunkers, Kavi said. He turned to the door, his coat snapping behind him. Barak was waiting in the hallway. He stepped into stride with Kavi, his face grim. Sir, our scouts are reporting heavy movement at the perimeter of the estate. If we storm that house, it's not just a rescue. It's a declaration of civil war. The elders will side with Carmel to protect the peace. Kavi didn't slow down. His wolf was clawing at his chest. It wanted to rip Carmel's throat out. It wanted to taste the blood of the man who had laid hands on his woman. Then we don't storm it, Kavi said. He stopped and looked back at the office door. Ziva was standing there, looking lost. We send a distraction. Sir, tell Ziva that Liora is with Carmel at Safe House 4. Tell her they are together in the master suite. Give her the bypass codes for the outer gate. Kavi's lip curled into a cold smile. A jealous mate is more destructive than a battalion. While she's tearing the front door down, we go in through the service tunnels. Understood, Barak said. He hesitated, pulling a sealed envelope from his inner pocket. This just arrived from the lab. The private courier said it was flagged as high priority. Kavi snatched the envelope. He ripped it open as he walked toward the elevator. He expected more reports on the fire or the Thorne pack's movements. He pulled out the DNA comparison. He stopped walking. The hallway seemed to tilt. He read the markers once. Then twice. Dollar probability of paternity, 99.9%. The names listed were Joel and Carmel. The boy wasn't a Thorne. He wasn't a stray. He was Carmel's biological son. Kavi felt a coldness settle in his gut that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. He had spent months using the boy as a pawn to control Liora. He had convinced himself that the child was just a tool. But this changed the math. Carmel wouldn't just keep Joel for leverage. He would keep him because he was an heir. And Liora? She would never leave without her son. If Kavi took her now, he would be taking a mother away from her biological child. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Kavi stared at the paper in his hand. The ink seemed to sear into his palms. If he saved Liora, he had to take the boy. If he took the boy, he was stealing a son from a father. The pack laws were clear on bloodline rights. If he moved against a father's claim, he lost his own standing. He would lose his company, his title, and his protection. He crushed the paper in his fist. If I bring her back, Kavi whispered, I lose everything. I can't breathe. Help me, I can't breathe. Liora slumped against the side of the bed, her hand clutching her throat. She made sure to knock the medical monitor over. It hit the floor with a satisfying crash, and the alarm began to blare a high-pitched, rhythmic scream. The heavy door buzzed and swung open instantly. The nurse rushed in, her face pale. Mrs. Thorne? Liora. Liora slumped further, her eyes rolling back just enough to look convincing. As the nurse leaned over her to check her pulse, Liora watched the woman's movements. The nurse reached for the emergency wall unit to call for backup. Stay still, the nurse commanded. I'm getting the doctor. The nurse turned her back for a split second to reset the alarm. Liora's hand darted to the bedside table. She had broken the gifted crystal water pitcher an hour ago, hiding the largest shard under her pillow. She didn't use it on the nurse. Instead, she jammed the jagged glass into the reset port of the internal comms panel. The electronics sparked. The screen flickered, hissed, and then bypassed the security lockout. I'm going to get help, the nurse said, distracted by the smoke coming from the wall. She ran out of the room to find a technician. Liora scrambled to her feet. Her ankles screamed in protest, but she ignored it. She dragged herself to the flickering screen. The system was haywire. It was cycling through the estate's internal feeds. She saw the kitchen. She saw a hallway. Then, the screen settled on a small, brightly lit room filled with stuffed animals and medical equipment. Joel was sitting upright in a small bed. He looked pale, but his eyes were bright. He was holding a crumpled Polaroid photo in his small hands. "Daddy," Joel whispered to the empty room. "When is Daddy coming?" Leora's heart broke. She leaned closer to the screen. Joel wasn't looking at a photo of Carmel. He was looking at a candid shot of Kavi sitting at his desk, a photo Liora didn't even know existed. Joel didn't know about DNA or bloodlines. He only knew who had stood between him and the dark. The door behind Liora clicked. She barely had time to scramble back onto the bed and hide the glass shard before Carmel walked in. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his eyes looked bloodshot. "The nurse said you had a fit," Carmel said. He walked to the bed and sat on the edge. He smelled of sandalwood and a sharp, metallic scent that made Leora's skin crawl. The mate bond he shared with Ziva was clearly straining him. His energy was jagged and unpredictable. "I just panicked," Liora lied, her voice trembling. "I woke up and didn't know where I was." Carmel reached out and stroked her hair. His touch was light, but his fingers were shaking. "I have a plan, Liora. We're leaving this territory. Tonight. I've secured a place in the north. We can start over. You, me, and Joel. I'll restore your title. You'll be my Luna again." Liora looked at him. She saw the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't a savior. He was a man losing his grip on everything. "Can we really?" Liora whispered. She leaned into his touch, forcing herself not to flinch. She shifted closer, her hand moving toward his hip where the biometric keycard was clipped to his belt. "You would really take us away from all this? From Ziva?" "Ziva is a mistake I'm fixing," Carmel growled. His eyes flashed a dull, sickly yellow. The wolf in him was unstable. "She's nothing. You're the one who belongs at my side." Liora tilted her head back, offering him her neck. It was a gesture of submission she knew he couldn't resist. As he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers, her fingers moved with the precision of a thief. She unclipped the keycard. It was cold and light in her palm. She tucked it into the waistband of her thin medical pants. "I want to believe you, Carmel," she breathed against his skin. Suddenly, a muffled explosion rocked the building. The lights in the room flickered and turned red. "Carmel, you coward. I know she's in there." Ziva's voice echoed through the ventilation system, distorted by rage and amplified by a megaphone. Screams followed, along with the sound of glass shattering downstairs. "She found us," Carmel hissed. He stood up, his face contorting into a mask of fury. "Stay here. Do not move." He turned and sprinted out of the room, the door locking behind him. Liora didn't waste a second. She limped to the door and swiped the stolen keycard. The light turned green. The bolt retracted with a heavy thud. The hallway was a chaos of red emergency lights and distant shouting. Liora stayed close to the wall, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. She reached the door to the pediatric wing. She swiped the card again. The room was quiet, lit only by a soft nightlight. "Joel," she whispered, pushing the door open. "Baby, it's Mommy. We have to go." She rushed toward the bed, but stopped dead. Joel wasn't alone. A tall, broad-shouldered man was standing over the bed, his hand resting on Joel's shoulder. He was dressed in tactical black, and his eyes were fixed on the door. "You're late, Liora," Barak said. "The fire was a gift, Kavi. I just didn't send back the receipt." Carmel stood in the center of the nursery hallway, his shirt stained with sweat. He looked like a man who had finally stopped pretending to be a saint. The sound of Ziva's screaming and the breaking of furniture echoed from the floor below, but up here, it was just the two of them. Kavi didn't reach for the handgun tucked into his waistband. He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a stack of legal papers. He tossed them onto a nearby console table. You didn't start it, Kavi said, his voice dangerously calm. I checked the forensics. The wiring was old, and the Thorne pack was negligent. But you saw the sparks. You saw the smoke on the cameras. And you waited. Carmel let out a jagged laugh. I wanted her dead to the world. If everyone thought she died in that penthouse, no one would look for her. She could be mine. Truly mine. Without your shadow over us. Without her father's greed. Just a ghost in my house. She's not a ghost, Carmel. She's a woman who survived you, Kavi said. He stepped closer, his boots heavy on the hardwood. And I know about the boy. I have the DNA results. Carmel froze. His eyes flickered to the closed door of the nursery where Liora and Barak were. Then you know he's mine. He is a true heir. The pack will never let you keep him. You're an outcast, Kavi. A bastard with a title. You have no claim to my blood. Blood doesn't make a father, Kavi snapped. He moved so fast Carmel didn't have time to flinch, grabbing his brother by the throat and pinning him against the wall. Holding the boy through the smoke does. Staying awake in the ICU for 3 days while he fought to breathe does. You hid in your mansion while he died. I carried him out. Kavi tightened his grip just enough to see Carmel's face turn a bruised purple. Sign the papers. You renounce all parental rights. You sign over your shares of the estate to a trust for Liora. In exchange, I give you a clean exit. I'll tell the elders you were protecting her. I'll let you keep your reputation. If you don't, I will bury you under the wreckage of that penthouse. Carmel gasped for air, his hands clawing at Kavi's wrists. You would give up the leverage? You'd lose the Thorne merger, for a child that isn't yours. I'm not doing it for the merger, Kavi growled. The sound of the elevator chiming broke the tension. The doors slid open and Ziva stumbled out. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was psychotic. She was holding a small, silver-plated revolver, her hand shaking so violently the barrel was dancing. Where is she? Ziva shrieked. She didn't even look at Kavi. Her eyes were locked on the nursery door. Where's the bitch who stole my life? I'm going to end this. I'm going to kill her and then I'm going to kill that brat. Kavi let go of Carmel, stepping back to intercept her. Ziva, put the gun down. This isn't your fight. Everything is my fight. Ziva screamed. She raised the gun, aiming it directly at the door. He doesn't love me because of her. He doesn't look at our daughter because of that boy. The nursery door swung open. Liora stepped out. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a soldier. Her hospital gown was tied tight at the waist, and her eyes were cold. Liora, get back! Kavi shouted, reaching for his own weapon. Ziva lunged forward, her finger tightening on the trigger. Liora didn't scream. She didn't run. As Ziva swung the pistol toward her face, Liora stepped into the attacker's space. It was a move Kavi had seen his security teams practice 1,000 times. Liora grabbed Ziva's wrist, twisting it upward and outward. With her other hand, she drove her palm into Ziva's elbow. The gun fired once, the bullet shattering a decorative vase, before Ziva's arm buckled. Liora swept Ziva's lead leg, sending the blonde woman crashing to the floor. Liora kicked the gun away and stood over her, breathing hard. Kavi stared at her. He felt a strange, terrifying surge of pride. She hadn't just survived, she had adapted. Carmel scrambled to his feet, looking between Kavi and Liora. Liora, darling, it's okay now. Kavi and we're settling this. We're going to find a way to make this work. You'll be safe with me. Kavi shook his head. She's coming with me, Carmel. The papers are on the table. Sign them. Liora looked at Kavi. Then she looked at Carmel. She looked at the legal documents that treated her son like a piece of property and the man who wanted to keep her as a ghost. She walked over to the console table, picked up the gun Ziva had dropped, and pointed it at the floor between the two brothers. I heard you both, Liora said. Her voice was steady. One of you wants to keep me in a cage. The other wants to trade my son's life for a clean exit. You're both talking about my child like he's a stock option. Liora, I'm trying to save you, Kavi said, his heart sinking. No, Liora said. You're trying to win. Both of you. She backed toward the nursery door where Barak was now standing with Joel in his arms. Joel was wrapped in a blanket, his eyes wide as he looked at the adults. Neither of you, Liora said, her fingers steady on the trigger. "I'm taking my son. The car is ready, Liora. The papers are signed." I looked at the black SUV idling at the edge of the estate. The rain was washing away the scent of gunpowder and Ziva's cheap perfume. In my hand, I held the heavy brass keycard and the folder Kavi had shoved into my arms as the sirens grew louder in the distance. He hadn't just given me my freedom. He had given me the majority shares of Maisel Incorporated. It was a fortune big enough to buy a small country, or at least a life where no one could ever touch me again. "Is he coming?" Joel asked, his voice small. He was buckled into the back seat, clutching the Polaroid of Kavi like a shield. I looked back at the sprawling manor. The lights were flickering. I could see the silhouette of the grandfather, the alpha of the elders, arriving with his personal guard. The scandal was already breaking. Carmel's kidnapping of a Thorne heir and the attempted murder of his own mate would strip him of everything. By morning, he wouldn't be a prince or a saint. He would be a rogue, a man without a pack, left to rot in the ruins of his reputation. "No, baby," I whispered, touching the cool glass of the car window. "Not today." I expected Kavi to stop me. I expected him to use his strength, his men, or his silver tongue to convince me that I belonged in his penthouse. But as we drove toward the border of the territory, I saw a lone figure standing by the iron gates. Kavi. He wasn't blocking the road. He was just standing there in the rain, his hands in his pockets. As the SUV slowed, he didn't reach for the door. He just looked at me through the window. There was no possessiveness in his eyes. There was only a quiet, aching sort of respect. He had finally learned that you cannot keep a bird by crushing its wings. He raised a hand in a silent farewell. I didn't stop. I told the driver to keep going. 1 year later, the air in the valley was sweet. It smelled of pine needles, wet earth, and the wild lavender growing along the fence of the farmhouse. It was a neutral territory, far from the politics of the Thorne pack and the violence of the city. I sat on the wooden porch, watching the sun dip below the mountains. My father sat in the rocking chair beside me. He was thinner now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were clear. "You never asked how I got you out," he said, his voice a low rasp. "I saw the signature on the file, Dad," I said. "I knew you were there." "I couldn't stop Carmel from taking you," he admitted, looking at his calloused hands. "But I was the one who jammed the fire shutters in the penthouse. I gave you that extra 3 minutes. It was the only way I could pay you back for all the years I sold you to the highest bidder." "You don't owe me anymore," I said, and I meant it. The anger had burned out a long time ago. A loud, joyful shout erupted from the grass below the balcony. Joel was sprinting through the tall weeds, his laughter ringing out like bells. Chasing after him was a man who had traded his tailored Italian suits for a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Kavi caught Joel, hoisting him up onto his shoulders and spinning him around. Joel screamed with delight, his small hands gripping Kavi's dark hair. "Daddy! Faster!" Joel yelled. Kavi laughed, a real, grounded sound that I had never heard in the city. He looked up at the balcony and caught my eye. He didn't move toward the house. He waited for a nod, an invitation. He was a guest in my life now, not the master of it. I smiled and waved him in. I leaned against the railing. My neck felt light. There were no diamonds weighing me down. No heavy Luna collar. No Thorne family crest. My lungs were clear, and for the first time, my heart didn't feel like it was under siege. I watched the man my son chose to love walk toward the porch. I watched the boy who was mine by blood and soul grow strong in the mountain air. For the first time in my life, I am not an Elon, a Thorne, or a Luna. I am simply Liora. And that is enough.